Fossil Bond is a 2-minute emotional stop-motion narrative about a paleontologist named Ennis who revives a fossil bone that transforms into a baby triceratops called Tricey. The two form an unlikely friendship and strengthen their bond through play and companionship before the story takes a more emotional turn. The original idea for the project came from visiting the Triceratops exhibition at the Manchester Museum, and combined this with the themes of friendship inspired by Dinosaur King and the Snowman and the Snow Dog. My target audience was for both adults and children, because I wanted the film to feel like a family fantasy adventure while also containing emotional drama and a meaningful message. During the planning stage, I created the sketches, concept art, and collected inspiration through Pinterest boards. I also used post-it notes to organize the story. After researching and developing the concept further, I wrote a 2-page script, which later became a full storyboard animatic with temporary scratch sound and music. One challenge during planning was figuring out how the Triceratops would logically come to life. To solve this, I designed a machine called the Egg Regenerator, inspired partially by the 1986 film The Fly. Once I completed the animatic and received positive feedback, I knew I had a good project to complete. In pre-production, I designed and built both main characters, Ennis and Tricey. I created the puppets using aluminium wires, 3D printed parts, liquid latex, and handmade clothing. This was my first time experimenting with liquid latex, so there was a lot of testing involved, including mixing it with acrylic paint. One of the biggest challenges for me was creating Ennis's clothes. Sewing by hand took a long time, and I was worried about removing clothes for adjustments. I eventually solved the problem using Velcro and a glue gun. I've enjoyed building the sets and props, including setting out the linen fabric and using real building sand for sand hills. Creating the Egg Regenerator was especially difficult because it involved different materials, tools, and moving parts. The props included fossil bones out of laser cut and paint, 3D printed tools, and a miniature instant camera made from milliput. During production, I animated 24 frames per second using a mixture of 1s and 2 shots, depending on the scene. I carefully adjusted the puppets frame by frame using onion skinning, markers, and rigging equipment. The fetch shot with Tricey jumping was especially a little challenging because I had to suspend the puppet using the rig while keeping the movement natural. Looking back, one thing I would change is Ennis's hair design. I used plasticine, but it made the head too heavy and unstable, almost like a bobblehead. If I would remake this puppet, I would use black fabric hair instead. The lighting was also experimental because I wanted to create an atmosphere on how the beach represents, including the evening sunset, which consists of orange and purple. I used a variety of camera angles, including a bird's eye view, low angles, and over-the-shoulder shots to make the film feel cinematic. In post-production, I used Toon Boom Harmony to create the electricity and glow effects for the Egg Regenerator and the transformation scene. I enjoyed combining 2D effects with stop motion because it added more fantasy and energy to the film. The part I hate most of all was one of the biggest difficulties during post-production involving the music. Originally, I planned to work with the composer from the Royal Northern College of Music, but due to her nervousness and scheduling issues, she was unable to complete the soundtrack. Fortunately, I had a backup plan and managed to work with another composer from Soda who created the emotional soundtrack I wanted. Foley sound design felt much more natural to me, and it was one of the smoother parts of the production. But as I was close to the deadline, I've composited almost all of the shots that were in blue screen, and I've managed to pull through. Of course, there were problems during production. Near the end, Ennis's neck began to break, losing its flexibility, so I reinforced it using extra aluminium wire and a toothpick support. I also realized fabric shoes would have worked better than plasticine shoes, because the puppet sometimes loses balance due to its heavy head. However, I was intended to do fabric shoes, but due to time, I had to stick with plasticine. And despite a few continuity issues and inconsistencies, such as Ennis's neck, along with visible rigging marks that I've rubbed out. I'm proud that I avoided major issues like severe camera shakes. Overall, this project taught me a huge amount about advanced stop motion techniques, fabrication, lighting, patience, and problem solving. I experimented with new materials like liquid latex, improved my lighting skills further. I learned how important planning and adaptability are throughout production. If I were to improve anything in future projects next time, I would spend more time refining fabrication techniques, create more detailed shot lists, and experiment further with smoother camera movements. Despite all of the challenges, including the parts that I had to cut out, I'm extremely happy and proud of how Fossil Bond turned out. At one stage, I generally thought I wouldn't finish the film on time, but I managed to complete it and create a story that combines humor, emotion, and creativity. Most importantly, the project showed me how powerful emotional storytelling can be, even through stop-motion puppets and dinosaurs.